Billionaire ex-husband invited his poor ex-wife for his Christmas Eve dinner. She showed up in an $800 million jet and his twins. His hands were shaking so badly, he had to set down the whiskey glass. Cole Hartwell, the man who'd built a $3 billion empire without flinching, couldn't stop his voice from breaking as he stared at the 6-year-old boys standing in his library. "Are they mine?" he asked, even though he already knew, even though those gray eyes staring back at him were mirrors of his own. "Yes," Nora said quietly, watching the most powerful man in Chicago crumble in real time. "How old?" 6. They turned 6 in September. The math played across his face like a horror movie. September. 6 years old, which meant 7 years ago, when she'd disappeared without explanation, when she'd sent that text saying she couldn't do this anymore, when she'd vanished from his life like smoke. She'd been pregnant, carrying his children, and he'd had no idea. 7 years, he whispered, the words barely making it past his lips. "You knew for 7 years that I had sons, and you never once thought to tell me." "I found out the morning after your engagement party," Nora replied, her voice steady even as tears started falling. "The party where your mother offered me $500,000 to disappear. The party where I heard you tell your father you weren't sure about me. So no, Cole, I didn't tell you, because I watched you choose doubt over me, and I wasn't going to let my children be the obligation that trapped you in a life you clearly didn't want. That conversation was about law school." Cole exploded, 7 years of misunderstanding finally detonating between them. "I was talking about Harvard, not about you. I was telling my father I wasn't sure if I should defer admission, not that I was unsure about us." The revelation hung in the air like smoke from a gun that had already fired, already destroyed everything, already cost them 7 years they could never get back. But before I tell you how we got to this moment, before I show you how a single misheard conversation destroyed 2 lives and created 2 new ones, you need to understand where this story really begins. And trust me, nothing about this is what you'd expect. Because this isn't just a story about a billionaire and his ex-wife. This is about what happens when pride meets pain, when love meets loss, when the person who broke you shows up years later expecting forgiveness, only to discover they broke something far bigger than a heart. They broke a family before it could even begin. So let me take you back to where it all started. Not 7 years ago at that disastrous engagement party, but to 3 months ago when an invitation arrived that would change everything. Seattle in September wore rain like a second skin. Nora Kingsley stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 43rd floor of the Columbia Center, watching the city blur beneath sheets of water that never seemed to stop. Behind her, spread across the conference table, were architectural plans for her latest acquisition, a historic building in Barcelona that she was about to transform into the crown jewel of Kingsley luxury properties. 23 hotels across 4 continents, a net worth that Forbes estimated at $2.3 billion, though they didn't know about the shell companies in the Caymans or the real estate holdings she kept deliberately off the books. At 31 years old, Nora had built an empire that made her untouchable. But the envelope sitting on her desk made her feel 24 again, vulnerable, exposed, terrified. It had arrived by private courier that morning, heavy ivory cardstock, the kind that cost more per square inch than most people spent on entire wedding invitations. The return address embossed in gold, Hartwell Estate, Chicago, Illinois. She'd known what it was before opening it, had felt it like a premonition, like the universe warning her that the past was about to come calling. Her assistant, Patricia, knocked softly before entering. "You've been staring at that envelope for 3 hours. Whatever it is, it can't be worse than the Istanbul zoning nightmare we dealt with last month." Nora turned from the window, managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Want to bet?" She picked up the envelope, slid her finger under the seal that probably cost $50 by itself, and pulled out the invitation. "Cole Hartwell requests the honor of your presence at his annual Christmas Eve dinner. The Hartwell Estate, 7 p.m., black tie." And beneath it, in handwriting she'd once loved seeing on birthday cards and random notes left on her pillow, a personal message. "Please come, Nora. There are things I need to say. Things I should have said 7 years ago. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm asking anyway. Please." Patricia leaned over her shoulder, read the invitation, and let out a low whistle. "Cole Hartwell, as in the Cole Hartwell, the real estate developer whose family basically owns the Chicago skyline? As in my ex-fiancé who I left 7 years ago without explanation and haven't spoken to since," Nora confirmed. And he's inviting you to his Christmas party? Patricia's journalist instincts were clearly firing. That's either incredibly romantic or incredibly stupid. Maybe both. Nora laughed, but there was no humor in it. He doesn't know. Doesn't know what? She walked to her desk, opened the bottom drawer, pulled out a photo frame she kept face down where no one could see it, turned it over to reveal two 6-year-old boys grinning at the camera, chocolate ice cream smeared across their identical faces. They had her dark hair, her smile, but their eyes, those distinctive gray-green eyes that seemed to see through everything, those were pure Hartwell. Doesn't know about them, Nora said quietly. Doesn't know that when I left Chicago 7 years ago, I was 8 weeks pregnant with his twins. Doesn't know that he has 2 sons who ask me every few months why their daddy doesn't want to know them. Doesn't know that the biggest mistake of my life was running instead of fighting. Patricia's eyes went wide. Holy hell, Nora. Does anyone know? Just you now. And Bertie. And my lawyers, obviously. I've kept their existence completely off the grid. Private schools under my maiden name. No social media. No public photos. When the Forbes profile ran last year, I made sure the photographer never came to the house. As far as the world knows, Nora Kingsley is a single, childless workaholic who built a hotel empire from nothing. Which you did, Patricia pointed out, while raising twins alone. That's not nothing. No, Nora agreed. It's everything. Which is why this invitation terrifies me. Are you going to go? Nora looked at the invitation again, at Cole's handwriting, at the plea embedded in those careful words. 7 years ago, she'd made a choice based on fear and misunderstanding. She'd protected her children from a father who might resent their existence. But in doing so, she'd also robbed them of knowing him. Robbed him of knowing them. The twins were getting older. Their questions were getting harder to answer. Why don't we have a daddy like other kids? Did he not want us? Did we do something wrong? No answer she gave could fill that hole. No amount of love from her could replace what they didn't have. I don't know yet, she finally said. Let me think about it. But she was lying. She already knew she was going. Not for Cole. Not for closure or reconciliation or any of the romantic nonsense that made for good movies. She was going because Finn had asked her 3 weeks ago if his daddy knew they existed. And when she'd said no, he'd gone quiet for a long time before saying, "Maybe you should tell him, Mama. Maybe he'd want to know us if he knew we were here. Maybe he would. Or maybe he'd look at them and see exactly what his mother had accused Nora of 7 years ago. A trap, an obligation, a mistake. Either way, it was time to find out." That evening, Nora sat at her kitchen island in the Belltown penthouse Dee bought 3 years ago, watching her sons do homework at the dining table. Finn was working on math with the intense focus he brought to everything, his tongue poking out slightly as he concentrated. Theo was reading, as always, currently absorbed in a book about marine biology. That was technically 3 grade levels above where he should be. They were so different, her boys. Finn was all energy and questions and fearless enthusiasm. He'd try to climb Everest tomorrow if she'd let him, would befriend strangers in elevators, would taste any food put in front of him just to see what it was like. Theo was careful, thoughtful, watching the world with those 2 old eyes before deciding how to interact with it. He felt things deeply, thought things through, and rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. But together, they were magic, inseparable, 2 halves of a whole that she'd somehow created alone in a Seattle hospital, while rain drummed against the windows and fear drummed against her heart. Bertie emerged from the kitchen carrying hot chocolate, the real kind made with melted chocolate and whole milk and a cinnamon stick, not the powder packet kind. She'd been with them since the boys were 3 months old, hired as a night nurse when Nora was so. Sleep deprived, she'd started hallucinating. 7 years later, she was family. The grandmother these boys had never had. The support system that had made everything else possible. "You've got that look," Bertie said quietly, setting mugs in front of the twins, who immediately abandoned homework in favor of marshmallows. "What look?" "The one that says you're about to do something that terrifies you." Nora pulled out the invitation, slid it across the counter. Bertie read it, her expression cycling through surprise, concern, and finally resignation. "When do we leave?" "We're not. I'm going alone." "The hell you are," Bertie said flatly. "Those boys have been asking about their father for years. You've been honest with them about why he doesn't know them. You've told them that someday, when the time was right, you'd tell him. Looks like someday just showed up in an expensive envelope. They're 6 years old, Bertie. Taking them to Chicago, to his world, introducing them to a man who doesn't know. They exist in front of 200 of his closest friends and business associates? That's not fair to them. And showing up without them is fair? Bertie challenged. What happens when he asks why you left? When he demands to know if there was more to the story? You going to lie to his face? Or are you going to tell him about his sons and then what? Fly home and schedule a meeting like this as a business negotiation? Nora hadn't thought that far ahead. Hadn't let herself imagine the actual conversation, the moment of revelation, the look on Cole's face when he learned he'd been a father for 6 years without knowing it. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted. I just know that Finn asked me if their daddy knows they exist. And when I said no, he asked why not. And I didn't have a good answer anymore. Theo looked up from his book, those gray-green eyes too perceptive. Are we going to meet our daddy? The question landed in the kitchen like a bomb with a lit fuse. Finn's head snapped up from his math. Bertie went very still. Nora took a breath, walked over to the dining table, knelt down so she was at eye level with her sons. I got an invitation to a party in Chicago, she said slowly. From a man I used to know a long time ago, before you were born. The daddy from the pictures, Theo said. It wasn't a question. Yes, the daddy from the pictures. He doesn't know about you. I never told him. And I need you to understand why before we decide anything. She'd had this conversation with them before, in pieces, in age-appropriate explanations that had evolved as they got older, but never like this. Never with the possibility of actually meeting him on the table. When I found out I was pregnant with you, Nora began, your daddy and I were going through something very difficult. We loved each other, but sometimes love isn't enough if the people around you don't want you to be together. His family didn't think I was good enough for him. They said mean things. They made me believe that if I told him about you, he would only stay. With me because he felt like he had to, not because he wanted to. Did he want to? Finn asked, cutting straight to the heart of it like he always did. I thought he didn't. I heard him say something that made me think he wasn't sure about me. So I left. I came here to Seattle. I had you two, and I built our life, just us. But you didn't ask him, Theo said quietly. You just decided for him. The observation, delivered in a 6-year-old's voice but with brutal accuracy, made Nora's throat tighten. You're right, I didn't ask him. I was scared, and I was young, and I made a choice that I thought was protecting all of us. But it also meant he never got to know you, and you never got to know him, and I'm sorry for that. Are we going to tell him now? Finn asked, excitement starting to creep into his voice despite his attempts at 6-year-old sophistication. Would you want to? If we did, it would be very overwhelming. Lots of people, lots of attention. Everything would change. The twins looked at each other, doing that wordless twin communication thing they'd been doing since before they could talk. Some conversation passed between them in glances and tiny expressions that no one else could read. Finally, Theo spoke. Will he be mean to you? The question revealed the depth of what they'd absorbed over the years. They knew their mother had been hurt, knew she'd built everything alone, knew there was pain in their origin story, even if they didn't fully understand it. I don't think so, Nora said honestly. I think he'll be shocked. Maybe angry that I didn't tell him sooner. Maybe sad about all the time he missed. But I don't think he'll be mean. Then we should go, Finn declared, with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real rejection. We should tell him. Because maybe he'll want to know us. And if he doesn't, at least we'll know. Mama says not knowing is worse than knowing something bad. Nora had said that, multiple times, usually about checking grades or asking difficult questions. Now her own philosophy was being used against her by a 6-year-old with devastating logic. Theo? She asked. What do you think? The quieter twin considered for a long moment. I think we should meet him. But Mama, if he's mean to you, or if he makes you sad, we leave. Okay? We get right back on the plane and come home. The protectiveness in his voice, this little boy ready to defend her, nearly broke her heart. Okay, she agreed. If anyone is mean, or if you get scared, or if it's too much, we leave immediately. This isn't about him. It's about you two, about giving you the chance to know your father. Everything else is secondary, even if you're sad. Finn pressed. Even if I'm sad. Bertie, still standing by the kitchen counter, wiped her eyes and tried to pretend she wasn't crying. When do we leave? 3 days, Nora said, the decision made. We'll take the Global 8000. Make a statement with the arrival. Let him see exactly what I built without him. And let him see what he missed, Birdie added, looking at the twins with fierce love. 2 beautiful boys who've been just fine without him, but who deserve the chance to have a father if he can pull his head out of his ass long enough to appreciate them. Birdie, Nora warned, but Finn was already giggling, and Theo was trying not to smile. What? I'm just saying what we're all thinking. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Nora had her lawyers draw up preliminary custody documents, not because she intended to formalize anything immediately, but because she needed protection. Cole Hartwell had resources she couldn't match, family connections that ran deep through Chicago's power structure. If he decided he wanted the twins, if he tried to use courts and money and influence to take them, she needed every legal safeguard in place. She consulted with Dr. Morrison, the child psychologist who'd been working with the boys since they were 4, helping them process having an absent father without developing abandonment issues. This could be very good for them, Dr. Morrison said during their video call. Meeting him, seeing that he's real, getting answers to their questions. But it could also be re-traumatizing if he rejects them, or if the meeting goes badly. You need to prepare them for all possible outcomes. How do I prepare 6-year-olds for the possibility that their father might not want them? The same way you've prepared them for everything else. With honesty, with love, and with the assurance that your love is unconditional regardless of what anyone else does. Nora also called her business partner, David Park, the textile manufacturer who'd taken a chance on her 7 years ago when she'd been a desperate single mother with talent but no capital. You're really doing this, he said when she explained her plan. I'm really doing this. And if it goes badly, then I come home and we finalize the Paris acquisition, and life continues exactly as it has been. But you hope it goes well. It wasn't a question, but Nora answered anyway. I hope he meets his sons and sees what I see. 2 incredible humans who deserve to have a father who shows up. If he can be that person, then yes, I hope it goes well. If he can't, then at least we'll know. The night before they left, Nora took the boys shopping for the party. She could have had something designed, could have called any number of fashion houses that would fall over themselves to dress the mysterious Nora Kingsley and her previously unknown children. Instead, she took them to her own boutique. The children's line she'd launched 2 years ago, Kingsley Kids, specialized in high-quality, durable clothing that looked expensive but could survive actual childhood. The flagship store in downtown Seattle was her pride and joy. The staff made a fuss over the twins, who were used to occasional visits but not used to being measured for custom pieces. Nora had decided on matching navy suits. Classic, sharp, unmistakably expensive, but not showy. She wanted Cole to see his sons as they were, not dressed up like little adults playing pretend. Why do we have to be so fancy? Finn asked, squirming while the tailor adjusted his sleeve length. Because first impressions matter, Nora said, and when you meet someone important for the first time, you want them to see the best version of you. Is he important? Theo asked. Our daddy. The question stopped Nora mid-breath. Was Cole important? He'd been everything once, then nothing. Now he was a question mark, a possibility, a man who'd broken her heart but who might still be worth knowing. He's your father, she said carefully. So yes, he's important. But boys, I need you to understand something. If he doesn't react well, if he's not ready to be your dad, that's not about you, that's about him. You two are perfect exactly as you are. Don't let anyone make you feel less than that. Even him? Finn pressed. Even him. The morning they left Seattle, rain drummed against the windows, like it was trying to warn them to stay. But Nora had made her choice. The Bombardier Global 8000 was fueled and ready at Boeing Field, the most expensive private jet currently in existence, on loan from a business contact who owed her several favors. The optics mattered. She needed to arrive in a way that made it clear she wasn't the broke, desperate girl who'd fled Chicago 7 years ago. She was Nora Kingsley, self-made billionaire, and she was bringing Cole Hartwell the biggest surprise of his life. The flight took just over 3 hours. The boys spent most of it playing games on their tablets or looking out the windows at clouds that seemed close enough to touch. Birdie read a thriller. Nora tried to work but mostly stared at her laptop screen, seeing nothing. Her mind already in Chicago. What would she say? How do you tell someone they're a father? How do you explain 7 years of silence? How do you prepare for the moment when his eyes meet those of his children for the first time? There was no script for this, no business plan, just truth about to collide with consequence. As the plane began its descent, Nora leaned forward, looking out at the city spreading below. Chicago in December wore snow like jewelry, the lake frozen at its edges, the buildings stabbing up into gray sky. This city had broken her once, had taken the girl she'd been, and shattered her into so many pieces she'd had to build a completely new person from the shards. But she wasn't that girl anymore, and she wasn't here to be broken again. She was here to tell the truth. And truth, she'd learned, was the only weapon that mattered. "Mama," Theo said quietly, his hand finding hers. "Are you scared?" Nora looked at her son, at those eyes that were going to destroy Cole Hartwell the moment he saw them. "Terrified," she admitted. "But I'm going anyway." "That's what brave is," Finn said, repeating something she'd told him years ago when he'd been afraid of his first day of school. Being scared but doing it anyway. "Exactly," she said, pulling them both close. "And we're going to be brave together." The landing was smooth, the kind that cost millions in engineering to achieve. Through the window, Nora could see the media vans already gathering. Someone had tipped them off, which meant someone in Cole's circle had wanted this documented. Good. Let them document it. Let them capture the moment when Chicago society realized that the mysterious Nora Kingsley wasn't just a self-made billionaire. She was the mother of Cole Hartwell's secret children. The Bloomberg reporter was already live streaming when the aircraft door opened. Her voice carried clearly in the cold December air. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're watching something extraordinary here at Chicago Executive Airport. That's the Bombardier Global 8000, valued at over $800 million, one of only 2 in private hands worldwide. And the woman descending those steps, that's Nora Kingsley, founder and CEO of Kingsley Luxury Properties, the hotel empire that's revolutionized experiential travel across 3 continents. But the question everyone's asking is, who are those children?" Nora emerged first, wearing white because white had become her signature. The color of resurrection, of starting over, of refusing to hide. The coat alone was a custom piece from her collaboration with Zara Hayes, designed to make a statement without saying a word. Then came the boys. Finn first, his hair styled back, revealing features that anyone who'd ever met Cole Hartwell would recognize immediately. Those eyes, that jawline, the way he held himself with unconscious confidence. Theo followed, more cautious but no less striking, his hand gripping his stuffed bear like a lifeline. They flanked their mother perfectly, tiny hands in hers, and Nora watched recognition ripple through the assembled media like electricity through water. Someone gasped. Someone else started typing frantically. The Bloomberg reporter's voice went up an octave. "Those children, do you see their eyes? Someone get a photo of those eyes." Nora walked past the cameras without acknowledging them, though she knew every angle they were capturing. Finn stayed close to her right side, his eyes taking in everything with intense curiosity. Theo waved once, a tiny gesture that would become infamous by evening news. The Bentley waited exactly where specified, the driver someone she'd hired personally. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford with her children involved. As they settled into the leather seats, Finn asked the question that had been building since they'd left Seattle. "Mama, will he be there when we get there?" Nora had arranged their arrival to coincide with the party already in progress. She wanted to walk in when Cole was surrounded by guests, when backing out would be impossible, when the truth would have an audience. "Yes, baby, he'll be there. Will he like us?" The question, asked in Finn's small voice, nearly broke her heart. "I don't know," she said honestly, pulling him close. "But that's his choice to make, not yours. You two are perfect exactly as you are. If he can't see that, that's his loss, not yours." The drive from the airport took 40 minutes through pre-holiday traffic. The boys watched Chicago pass outside their windows, this city that lived in their mother's stories but had never been their reality. The Hartwell estate rose from the North Shore like something from another era when wealthy men built monuments that would outlast their names. The driveway was lined with luminarias, thousands of them, creating a river of light that guided guests toward the main house where every window glowed with warm invitation. Other vehicles were arriving simultaneously, Maybachs and Rolls-Royces and Teslas, each one disgorging passengers in couture and diamonds, Chicago's elite gathering, to celebrate Christmas Eve with the man whose family had shaped this city's skyline for 3 generations. "It's like a castle," Finn breathed, his nose pressed against the window. "Is it bigger than our hotel in Dubai?" Theo asked. "Different kind of big," Nora replied, though truthfully the estate probably could house her entire Dubai property with room to spare. The car stopped. A valet appeared, opening her door with practiced deference. She stepped out onto cobblestones dusted with fresh snow and immediately felt every eye turned toward her. She dressed for impact. The white gown moved like water, caught light like diamonds, and cost more than the studio apartment where she'd taken those pregnancy tests 7 years ago. But it was the boys who caused the real stir. They emerged from the car in their matching navy suits, flanking their mother with identical, serious expressions, and Nora watched recognition ripple through the crowd. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered urgently into their phone, because anyone who'd ever seen Cole Hartwell would recognize those faces. The strong jawline, the gray-green eyes, the way they held themselves with unconscious confidence. These weren't just any children. These were Hartwell children. The front doors opened, and there he was. Cole Hartwell stood backlit by the chandelier glow of his ancestral home, wearing a tuxedo that had probably been custom-made by someone whose waiting list spanned years. He'd aged well. The boyishness she'd loved had hardened into something more commanding, more certain. Success suited him the way it suited some people, like armor they'd earned through battle. Their eyes met across 30 feet of driveway, across 7 years of silence, across the chasm of everything that had been broken and never repaired. His expression cycled through confusion, recognition, shock, and then his gaze dropped to the children holding her hands, and Nora watched his entire world reorganize itself in real time. She could see the moment he registered their ages, the moment he noticed their eyes, the moment understanding began creeping in like dawn after the longest night. He knew. Without a word spoken, without any explanation, he knew. Those were his sons standing there in their little suits, holding their mother's hands, looking at him with curious expressions that didn't yet understand they were witnessing their father's heart break and heal simultaneously. "Mama," Finn whispered. "He looks sad." Why does he look sad? Because he just realized what he lost, Nora thought. Because he's doing math in his head. Because he's understanding that every choice has consequences that compound like interest. "I don't know, baby," she said aloud. "Why don't we go find out?" She walked toward Cole Hartwell with her sons beside her, each step measured for maximum impact. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing they were witnessing something that would be discussed at Chicago dinner parties for decades. Cole hadn't moved, couldn't seem to move. He just stood there watching her approach, his face doing complicated things as he processed what was about to happen. When they were close enough to speak without shouting, Nora stopped, looked up at the man she'd once loved completely, who doubted her enough to lose everything. "Hello, Cole," she said quietly. "Thank you for the invitation. I hope you don't mind. I brought guests." Nora. Her name in his mouth sounded like prayer and curse combined. His voice had deepened, roughened with whatever these 7 years had carved into him. "I didn't know. I never thought you'd actually come. You invited me." "I know. I just didn't expect you to say yes. And I certainly didn't expect—" His voice trailed off as his attention shifted fully to the boys. Finn was staring at him with open fascination. Theo was quieter, more careful, clearly assessing this stranger who their mother had brought them across the country to meet. "These are my children," Nora said, her voice steady though her pulse hammered traitorously. "Finn and Theo. Say hello to Mr. Hartwell, boys." "Hello," Finn said immediately, because he'd never met a stranger he couldn't befriend. Theo just looked at Cole for a long moment before asking, "Are you Cole Hartwell?" The directness of childhood, the simple question that demanded a simple answer, seemed to break through Cole's paralysis. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am. Mama said we'd meet you here," Finn added helpfully. "She said you might be our daddy, but we'd have to see first." The words landed like artillery fire. Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Phones appeared from pockets and purses, capturing this moment for posterity, for gossip, for the kind of scandal that would dominate headlines through New Year's. Cole looked like he'd been shot. His face went through several transformations in rapid succession. Shock about what Finn had just said. Confusion about what it meant. Then slow, creeping horror as understanding fully dawned. He sank to his knees on the cobblestones, heedless of his expensive tuxedo, bringing himself to eye level with his sons. "How old are you?" he asked, though Nora knew he was really asking her, really demanding confirmation of what he'd already calculated. 6, Finn answered proudly. We had our birthday in September. Mama made us a cake shaped like a rocket ship because we want to be astronauts. It was chocolate inside, even though the outside was decorated silver. It was the best cake ever. September, 7 years ago, 10 months after she'd fled Chicago. The timeline writing itself across Cole's face as he processed, calculated, understood. He stood slowly, his attention returning to Nora with an intensity that made her remember why she'd been careful to avoid him all these years. Cole Hardwell had always seen too much, understood too quickly, reached conclusions others missed. We need to talk, he said. Not a question, not quite a demand. Privately. The children, Nora started. Will be perfectly safe with my head of security, Cole interrupted, gesturing to a woman who appeared. Instantly, professional and warm, clearly accustomed to handling unexpected situations. Vanessa has 3 kids of her own. They'll probably have more fun with her than watching adults have difficult conversations. Theo looked at Vanessa with the assessment of someone who'd had many caregivers and had developed criteria for evaluation. Do you have hot chocolate? The best in Chicago, Vanessa replied seriously, understanding the assignment. With marshmallows shaped like snowmen. That settled it. The children went willingly, leaving Nora with no excuse, no buffer, no way to avoid what was coming. As Cole gestured toward a side door, away from the ballroom chaos, Nora caught a glimpse of Catherine Hartwell standing near the grand staircase. The older woman's face had gone completely white, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. Good, Nora thought with fierce satisfaction. Let her understand what her manipulation cost. Let her see exactly what 7 years of consequences looks like in matching Navy suits. The library looked exactly as Nora remembered it. Floor-to-ceiling books that probably hadn't been read in generations, leather furniture that smelled like money, and mahogany, a fireplace crackling with gas logs designed to look real without the mess of actual fire. Cole closed the door behind them with careful deliberation, then just stood. There, staring at her like she was a ghost rendered in flesh and couture. 6 years old, he finally said. Which means 7 years ago, when you left, when you sent that text saying you couldn't do this anymore, you were already pregnant, Nora confirmed, deciding to be merciful with the confirmation he was clearly desperate for. About 8 weeks. I found out the morning after your engagement party. 8 weeks. So that night, when you were there, when you left without saying goodbye, you didn't know yet. No. I found out the next day. 3 pregnancy tests, all positive, all terrifying. Cole walked to the bar, poured himself whiskey with shaking hands, then seemed to think better of it and set the glass down untouched. 7 years, he said, the words testing themselves in his mouth. You've known for 7 years that I had children, and you never thought to. He couldn't finish, couldn't articulate the magnitude of what he was processing. Never told you, Nora completed. Never reached out, never gave you the chance to be their father. Yes. Why? The single word carried so much weight. Hurt and confusion and anger and desperate need to understand. Nora had practiced this conversation in her mind for months, ever since deciding to accept his invitation. Had rehearsed different versions depending on his reaction. But standing here, watching him try to process having his entire reality rewritten, she found her rehearsed speeches evaporating. Because your mother offered me $500,000 to disappear, she said quietly. Because I stood outside that library door 7 years ago and heard you tell your father you weren't sure about me, that you worried I was manipulating you. Because when I found out I was pregnant the next morning, I understood that if I told you, you'd never know if you stayed with me out of love or obligation, and I couldn't, her voice cracked, I couldn't watch you resent me for trapping you. Couldn't watch our children grow up knowing their father stayed out of duty instead of choice. Cole's face went through several transformations in rapid succession. Shock about the money his mother had offered, confusion about what conversation Nora had overheard, then slow, creeping understanding as pieces started falling into place. What conversation? He asked, his voice tight. What did you hear me say to my father? That you weren't sure about me, that you worried I was manipulating you, that you wanted to make sure you were making the right choice. Nora could see him replaying that night in his mind, searching his memory for the conversation she'd overheard. Then his eyes went wide with sudden, horrible realization. Oh God. The library. You were outside the library. I was coming to find you, Nora said, Your mother had just offered me money to leave. She told me you were discussing something important with your father. I went to the door, I heard you talking, and I heard enough to confirm everything. She'd said about me not being good enough, about you having doubts. That conversation was about law school. Cole exploded. 7 years of misunderstanding finally detonating between them. About Harvard Law School. My father was asking if you'd pressured me to defer my admission for another year, if I was choosing architecture over law because of you, and I said I wasn't sure. I said I wanted to make sure I wasn't being manipulated by my own desire to please you into making a bad career choice. The revelation hit Nora like a physical blow. What? I was never talking about doubting you, Cole said, his voice breaking. I was talking about doubting whether I should go to law school like my parents wanted, or pursue architecture like I wanted. My father was concerned that you were influencing me to rebel against the family plan, and I told him I needed to be sure I was making career decisions for the right reasons, not to impress a woman or spite my parents. Nora felt the floor tilt beneath her. 7 years. 7 years of choices made on a foundation of misunderstanding. 7 years of believing Cole had doubted her when he'd been doubting his career path. I didn't know, she whispered. Of course you didn't know. Cole's anger was finally breaking through his shock. Because you didn't ask me. You didn't trust me enough to have a conversation. You just decided, based on one overheard sentence taken completely out of context, that I didn't want you, that I'd resent our children, that running was better than fighting. You're right, Nora said, and watched surprise flicker across his face at her immediate agreement. You're absolutely right. I should have asked. Should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth. But Cole, I was 24 years old. I'd just had your mother tell me I was a gold digger trying to trap her son. I'd just heard what I thought was you confirming her worst accusations, and I was pregnant and terrified and convinced that your family would destroy me if I stayed. So you destroyed us instead. The accusation hung in the air, brutal and accurate. Yes, Nora admitted, I destroyed us. I made a choice based on fear and incomplete information, and that choice cost both of us 7 years we can never get back. I can't undo that. I can only tell you I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back the first 6 years of my son's lives, Cole said, but his anger was deflating into something raw, more painful. Sorry doesn't let me hold them as babies or hear their first words or teach them to walk. I know. Tell me about them. Cole sank into one of the leather chairs like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. Please, just tell me everything. So Nora did. She told him about the pregnancy, about morning sickness so severe she'd lost 15 pounds in the first trimester, about the garage apartment in Seattle with pipes that screamed and heating that barely worked, about eating ramen and working freelance design jobs for $50 at a time while her body built 2 humans. She told him about the March blizzard, about driving herself to the hospital with contractions 4 minutes apart, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, terrified she'd deliver on the side of the highway. Labor was 23 hours, she said quietly. Theo came first. He wasn't breathing at first, just silent. I've never been more scared in my life than those 10 seconds before they got him to cry. Then Finn came 12 minutes later, screaming loud enough to wake the entire floor. They were premature. 4 pounds 2 ounces and 4 pounds even. Spent 3 weeks in the NICU. Cole had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I lived in the hospital family lounge, Nora continued. Pumped breast milk every 3 hours. Worked on my laptop between feedings because I had exactly $200 in my account and rent was due. A nurse named Birdie took pity on me. She's been with us ever since. She's the grandmother they've never had. First words? Cole's voice was muffled by his hands. Mama for Theo at 10 months. No for Finn at 11. First steps, Finn at 10 months, running by 11. Theo took longer, didn't walk until 13 months, but he was speaking in full sentences by 18 months. Finn's the adventurous one. He'd climb Everest tomorrow if I let him. Theo's careful. He thinks everything through. They're different but inseparable. What do they like? Strawberries, but not blueberries. Marine biology books, even though they're way above their reading level. Building things. Theo draws constantly. Finn takes everything apart to see how it works. They both want to be astronauts this week. Last week, it was marine biologists. The week before that, pastry chefs. Despite everything, Cole laughed. It sounded broken. Do they ask about me? All the time, Nora said. Less when they were younger, more as they got older. At first it was just, why don't we have a daddy like other kids? I told them the truth, age-appropriate versions, that their daddy didn't know they existed, that I'd made a choice not to tell him because I was scared, that someday when they were ready, we might tell him together. And they're ready now? Finn asked me 3 weeks ago if you knew they existed. When I said no, he asked why not. I didn't have a good answer anymore. So yes, they're ready. Whether you're ready is a different question. Cole finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. What do you want from me, Nora? Why come back now? Why not just keep living your life without me? Because they deserve to know their father. Because I'm tired of carrying this secret like it's something shameful instead of the best thing that ever happened to me. Because you sent me an invitation saying you had things you needed to say, and I realized I had things I needed to say too. So here we are. Here we are, Cole echoed. 7 years late. Better late than never. Is it? Is it really better? Or is this just going to break all of us in new ways? I don't know, Nora said honestly. I don't have those answers. I just know that not telling you was wrong. Keeping them from you was wrong. And I'm trying to make it right, even if I'm 7 years too late. They sat in silence for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the party continued without them. 200 people celebrating. Christmas Eve, while the host's world imploded in his library. What happens now? Cole finally asked. Now you decide what kind of father you want to be. If you want to be one at all, I'm not going to force you into their lives. But if you choose to be part of their world, you have to mean it. You can't show up for the fun parts and disappear when it gets hard. They've had enough absence. They need consistency or nothing. I want to know them, Cole said immediately. God, Nora, of course I want to know them. They're my sons. I've missed 6 years. I'm not missing another day. It's not that simple. Why not? Because they're not concepts or ideas. They're real children with real feelings who've built a life that works without you. Introducing you into that life is going to change everything for them. I need to know you're committed before I let you disrupt their world. What do you need from me? Nora had prepared for this, had consulted lawyers and psychologists, and had a list ready. Consistency, she said. Video calls twice a week minimum. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Pacific time. You show up or you call ahead to reschedule, but you don't just skip. They need to know you're reliable. Done, Cole said without hesitation. Every other weekend to start. You can come to Seattle or they can come here once they're comfortable. But again, consistency. You don't cancel because a meeting runs long or a deal needs closing. Done. Therapy. For them to process all this. For us to learn to co-parent. Probably for you too, to work through whatever you're feeling about all this. Agreed. And legally, I need custody agreements. Not because I think you'll try to take them, but because I need protection. You have resources I can't match. If you wanted to make my life difficult through the courts, you could. I need guarantees that won't happen. Cole's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'll have my lawyers draw up whatever you need. Joint custody, your primary residence. I won't fight you on any of it. They're your children. You raised them. I'm asking for the privilege of being included, not demanding to reshape everything. The concession was more than Nora had expected. What about us? The question came quietly, weighted with everything they weren't saying. Nora looked at him, really looked, seeing not just the billionaire who'd broken her heart, but the man who was clearly shattered by learning he'd been a father for 6 years without knowing it. I don't know, she said honestly. Right now, I need to focus on them, on making sure this transition doesn't hurt them. Everything else is secondary. But is there a possibility? Someday? Ask me in 6 months, after you've proven this isn't just shock and guilt driving you, after you've shown up for sick days and tantrums and boring Tuesdays. Ask me when being their father is just life, not an adventure. Then maybe we can talk about us. Cole absorbed this, accepted the boundary even as disappointment flickered across his face. 6 months. I can work with that. Can I hug you? The question came so quietly Nora almost missed it. Just once. Just two. He couldn't finish, couldn't articulate what the gesture would mean. Nora stepped forward, allowing herself to be pulled into his arms for the first time in 7 years. He held her like she was made of glass and grief combined, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking with silent sobs that felt like release and devastation braided together. I'm so sorry, he whispered, for not fighting for you, for letting my family make you feel less than you were, for missing everything that mattered. I'm so sorry. I know, she whispered back. Me too. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd loved each other, once, mourning what had been lost and what could never be recovered. Then the library door opened without a knock. Catherine Hartwell stood in the doorway, her composure carefully reconstructed, but her eyes betraying panic. Cole, darling, your guests are asking for you. Perhaps this conversation could continue another time, when... She stopped as her eyes landed on Nora, recognition and horror dawning simultaneously. Did you offer her money to leave me? Cole asked, his voice dangerously quiet. His arms had dropped from Nora, but he'd positioned himself slightly in front of her, protective. 7 years ago, did you offer Nora $500,000 to disappear? Catherine's pause was too long, too calculated. I was protecting you from someone who clearly wasn't suitable. She was pregnant, Cole said, each word falling like a hammer. Pregnant with my children, and you drove her away. Catherine's face drained of all color. Children? What children? The twin sons you kept me from knowing about for 6 years. The grandsons you'll never meet because I now understand exactly what kind of person you are. Cole, I was protecting the family name. She was nobody from nowhere, clearly trying to trap you into... Stop talking, Cole interrupted, his voice like ice. Every word out of your mouth is making this worse. You manipulated her. You poisoned her against me. You cost me 6 years with my sons because you couldn't stand that I loved someone you didn't choose for me. Catherine's mask cracked completely. I did what any mother would do. No, Cole said quietly. You did what you would do, and it cost me everything. Get out of my library. Get out of my house. And don't contact me until you're ready to take actual responsibility for what you've done. Catherine looked like she'd been slapped. This is my home too. Your father, Dad's been dead for 3 years and you know he'd be ashamed of what you did. Now leave before I have security escort you out of your own son's Christmas party. Catherine opened her mouth, closed it, then turned on her heel and left, her exit far less composed than her entrance. The door closed behind her, and Cole seemed to deflate, all the anger draining out of him at once. I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't be, Nora said. I've wanted to watch someone stand up to her for 7 years. I should have stood up to her then. Should have protected you from her poison. We were both young. Both made mistakes. All we can do is try to do better now. Cole nodded, then straightened his shoulders, visibly pulling himself together. The boys. I should meet them properly. Not as some stranger at a party, but as their father, Nora completed. Yes, but Cole, be prepared. They're going to have questions. They're going to test you. Finn will probably be excited and overwhelming. Theo will be more cautious. Don't take it personally if they don't immediately accept you. I'm ready. No, you're not, Nora said gently. No one's ever ready for this. But you're going to try anyway, and that's what matters. They walked back toward the ballroom together, and Nora was acutely aware of every eye tracking their movement. The party had continued, but the energy had shifted. Everyone knew something significant had happened. The whispers were already spreading like wildfire. Vanessa appeared with Finn and Theo, both of whom had chocolate on their faces and looked deliriously happy. They ran to Nora, then stopped, looking at Cole with renewed curiosity. The library conversation had happened. The truth had been told. Now came the part that actually mattered. Are you our daddy? Finn asked, cutting straight to the heart of it. Cole knelt again, bringing himself to their level. Yes, he said, his voice steady despite the tears threatening. I am, and I'm so sorry I didn't know about you sooner, but I know now, and I'm not going anywhere. Mama says being a daddy isn't about biology, Theo said seriously, his gray-green eyes studying Cole's face. It's about showing up. Are you going to show up? The question, so simple yet so devastating, made several nearby people gasp, but Cole didn't flinch. Every day, he promised. For the rest of my life, I'm going to show up. I'm going to learn what you like and what you don't like. I'm going to make mistakes because I've never been a father before, but I'm going to try, and I'm never going to stop trying. The children seemed to accept this, their capacity for forgiveness infinite in the way only children could manage. You can hug us if you want, Finn offered generously. We give really good hugs. Cole pulled them both close, his arms wrapping around his sons for the first time, and Nora watched him break and heal simultaneously. Finn hugged back with his whole body, fearless as always. Theo was more careful, but he patted Cole's back like he was trying to comfort this adult who clearly needed gentleness. And Nora stood there watching the family she'd carried alone for 6 years. Finally include the man who should have been there all along. The room had gone completely silent. Phones were out, capturing every moment. The Bloomberg reporter was frantically live streaming. By tomorrow, this would be the only story anyone in Chicago was talking about. But Nora didn't care about any of that. She only cared about the sight of her sons in their father's arms, about the way Cole was crying without shame, about the beginning of something that might, possibly, eventually become a real family. When Cole finally released them, Finn immediately started asking questions. Do you like dinosaurs? Do you know how rockets work? Can you do a handstand? Do you have any pets? I like dinosaurs, Cole answered seriously, giving Finn his complete attention. I know a little about how rockets work, but probably not as much as you. I cannot do a handstand. And I don't have any pets, but I'd like to hear about yours. We have 3 chickens, Theo said quietly. Henrietta, Beatrice, and Steve. Steve is a boy chicken, but Finn named him before we knew. Steve is a great name for a chicken, Cole said solemnly, and just like that, the ice was broken. The boys started talking over each other, telling Cole about their school and their house, and their favorite foods, and everything that had happened in their 6 years of life. He listened like it was the most important business meeting of his career, asking questions, remembering details, visibly trying to memorize everything. Nora caught Bertie's eye across the room. The older woman was crying, not even trying to hide it. She gave Nora a nod that said, "We did it. We got them here. The rest is up to him." Eventually, the party had to continue. Cole's business partners needed attention. The mayor wanted to talk about something, but Cole kept the boys close, kept introducing them. "These are my sons," he'd say, the words seeming to grow more solid each time he spoke them. Finn and Theo. And each time he'd look at them with such naked wonder that Nora's heart would crack a little more. Around 9, the boys started yawning. They'd been up since 5 Seattle time, and the day was catching up with them. "We should go," Nora said quietly to Cole. "They're exhausted, and this has been overwhelming for everyone. Where are you staying?" "The St. Regis. Can I?" Cole hesitated. "Can I come see them tomorrow? Just breakfast, maybe. Nothing long. He didn't finish, but Nora understood. Now that he knew they existed, every moment without them felt like loss. "Tomorrow morning," she said, 9 a.m. in our suite. No grand gestures, no press. Just breakfast with your sons. I'll be there," Cole promised. 9 exactly. As they prepared to leave, Theo tugged on Cole's sleeve. The quiet twin, the careful one, looked up at his father with those devastating gray-green eyes. "Are you going to disappear?" he asked. "After tonight, are you going to go away again?" The question revealed everything they'd internalized over the years. The understanding that fathers were supposed to be there but theirs wasn't. The fear that even now, even meeting him, it might not last. Cole knelt one more time, his hands gentle on Theo's shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice fierce with promise. "I'm going to be in your life every single day from now on. Maybe not always in person because you live far away, but always in your hearts. And I'm going to work very hard to be the daddy you deserve. Okay?" "Okay," Theo said, and seemed satisfied. The Bentley ride back to the St. Regis was quiet. Both boys fell asleep almost immediately, their heads on Nora's lap. Bertie sat across from them, looking at Nora with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Well?" Nora asked quietly. "He's devastated," Bertie said. "Angry at you, angry at himself, angry at his mother. But he wants them." That much was clear. "Wanting isn't enough." "No," Bertie agreed. "But it's a start. And did you see his face when they hugged him? That man fell in love with his sons the moment he saw them. Now he just has to prove he can sustain it." At the hotel, Nora tucked the boys into bed, reading 3 stories as required by Theo's strict protocols. They were asleep before she finished the 3rd one, exhausted by the biggest day of their lives. Alone in the living room of the suite, Nora poured herself wine and stood at the window, looking out at Chicago. This city had broken her once. But tonight, maybe, possibly, she'd started building something new from those old broken pieces. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cole. "Thank you for today, for bringing them, for giving me the chance. I know I don't deserve it. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it." She typed back, "They deserve a father who shows up." Be that person. His response came immediately. I will. Starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Exactly. Nora set down her phone and allowed herself to feel everything she'd been holding back all day. The fear, the relief, the grief for what was lost, the hope for what might be built. Tomorrow, Cole would arrive for breakfast. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The work of building trust, of establishing routines, of transforming strangers into family. But tonight, Nora had done what she'd come to do. She'd told the truth. She'd introduced Cole to his sons. She'd started something that couldn't be stopped now, only shaped. And as Chicago glittered below her, as snow began to fall on the city that had once destroyed her, Nora Kingsley felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because the past was erased, but because finally, the secrets were out and the truth had been told. And truth, she'd learned, was the only foundation strong enough to build a future on. Morning came too early and exactly on time. Nora woke at 6:30 Seattle time, which meant 8:30 Chicago time, her internal clock completely confused. The boys were still asleep, sprawled across the king bed in positions that defied physics. Finn had somehow rotated 90 degrees, his feet on the pillows. Theo was curled into the smallest ball possible, clutching his bear. She watched them for a long moment, these two humans who'd given her purpose when purpose seemed impossible to find. Whatever happened with Cole, whatever came next, she'd done right by them. They were loved, secure, confident. That was enough. That had to be enough. But watching them sleep, she couldn't help wondering what their lives might look like with a father in them. Not the fantasy version she'd sometimes imagined late at night, but the real, complicated version. The one where Cole showed up imperfectly but consistently. The one where these boys got to know the man who'd given them half their DNA, and maybe, possibly, could give them the things she couldn't provide alone. A complete family. Birdie emerged from her room already dressed, because Birdie was always already dressed. Already prepared, already 3 steps ahead of whatever chaos was coming. You slept, she observed, handing Nora coffee that was somehow exactly the right temperature. A little. He'll be here in 30 minutes. I know. Are you ready? Nora looked at her sons, at the suite that cost more per night than her. First apartment's monthly rent, at the city beyond the windows where the man who'd broken her heart was probably already awake, already counting down minutes until he could see his children again. No, she admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. The boys woke at 8:15, groggy and disoriented, until they remembered where they were, what had happened yesterday, what was happening today. Then Finn was immediately awake, bouncing with excitement. Is he coming? Is it 9 yet? What should we wear? Can we order room service? Do you think he likes waffles? Theo was quieter, more careful, his eyes asking questions his mouth wouldn't voice yet. What if he doesn't come? What if yesterday was enough for him? What if we're not what he wanted? Nora pulled them both close, kissed the tops of their heads that still smelled like hotel shampoo and childhood. Whatever happens today, she said quietly, you two are perfect. You're smart and funny and kind and brave. If he can't see that, that's his failing, not yours. But he will see it, right? Finn asked, the confidence in his voice not quite hiding the uncertainty underneath. He'll like us. I think he already does, Nora said honestly. But boys, liking you and being a good father are different things. We're going to give him the chance to prove he can do both. But it's going to take time. How much time? A lot. Months. Maybe years. Being a family isn't something that happens overnight. They dressed in comfortable clothes, not the fancy suits from yesterday. Nora wanted Cole to see them as they actually were, not dressed up for performance. Finn chose his dinosaur shirt despite Theo's insistence that it had a stain. Theo wore his favorite blue sweater, the one that was getting too small but he refused to give up. At 8:55, there was a knock at the door. He's early, Birdie observed, moving to answer it. Nora's heart was hammering. This was it. Not the dramatic revelation of yesterday, but the mundane reality of today. Breakfast. Conversation. The beginning of actually figuring out what CO parenting looked like when the parents had 7 years of silence to overcome. Cole stood in the hallway holding enough bakery bags to feed 20 people, his face uncertain, hopeful, terrified. He'd dressed down too, relatively speaking. No tuxedo, just dark jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than most people's car payments but looked casual enough. "Hi," he said, his eyes immediately finding the boys. "I didn't know what you liked, so I brought everything. Croissants, muffins, Danish, bagels, donuts, cinnamon rolls, fruit tarts, and I think there's a quiche in here somewhere." "That's a lot of food," Finn said, eyes wide. "Too much probably," Cole admitted, stepping inside when Bertie gestured him in. "But I thought we could figure out together what you like, and maybe what you don't like. I want to learn everything." Theo approached more cautiously, studying this man who was supposed to be their father but was still essentially a stranger. "Did you really come?" he asked quietly. Cole knelt immediately, bringing himself to eye level. "I promised I would, and I'm going to keep my promises from now on. Every single one. What if you have to work? Then I'll reschedule my work. You two are more important than any meeting or deal or anything else that might come up." The answer seemed to satisfy Theo, at least for now. He nodded seriously and went to investigate the bakery bags. They settled around the sweets dining table, an odd little breakfast party that was simultaneously completely normal and utterly surreal. Cole watched everything with intense focus, like he was trying to memorize every detail. The way Finn immediately went for the chocolate croissant. The way Theo carefully examined each option before selecting a blueberry muffin, then remembered he didn't like blueberries and switched to plain. "You don't like blueberries," Cole said, filing this information away like it was critical intelligence. "But you like strawberries. How did you know?" Theo asked, surprised. "Your mama told me. Yesterday. She told me lots of things about you, but I want to hear everything from you too." And just like that, the boys started talking. Finn dominated at first as always, telling Cole about their school and their teacher Mrs. Patterson, who was nice but gave too much homework, and their chickens in the treehouse Mama had built them last summer, and how he wanted to be an astronaut but also maybe a chef because cooking was actually really fun. Theo added details Finn forgot, corrected exaggerations, and slowly started contributing his own stories about the book he was reading on ocean ecosystems, about how he wanted to be a marine biologist, about the drawing he'd made of a giant squid that Mama had framed and hung in her office. Cole listened like this was the most important conversation of his life, asked questions, laughed at their jokes, looked at Nora occasionally with an expression that said, "I can't believe I missed 6 years of this." After they demolished approximately a third of the bakery hall, Finn wiped chocolate from his face and asked the question Nora had been expecting. "So what do we call you?" Cole looked to Nora, clearly unsure. She gave him a small nod. "Your choice. What do you want to call me?" Cole asked the boys. "Daddy feels weird," Finn said with his characteristic bluntness, "because we don't really know you yet. But Mr. Hartwell is too formal. What about just Cole for now?" Theo suggested. "And maybe later, when we know you better, we can call you Dad, if that's okay." The compromise was so mature, so thoughtful, that both adults felt their throats tighten. "Cole is perfect," Cole said. "And someday, if you decide you want to call me Dad, that would be the greatest honor of my life." The morning stretched into afternoon. Cole had cleared his entire day, unprecedented for a man whose assistant usually scheduled him in 15-minute increments. They talked, played card games that Finn won by cheating outrageously, drew pictures. Cole told them about his work, about designing buildings, about how architecture was like, solving puzzles where the pieces were rooms and light, and how people moved through spaces. "You're like Mama," Theo observed. "She designs hotels. You design buildings. You both make places for people." The connection seemed to strike Cole deeply. "We do. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. Your Mama and I both build spaces, just differently." "Did you love Mama?" Finn asked, because 6-year-olds didn't understand that some questions weren't meant to be asked directly. "Finn," Nora started, but Cole held up a hand. "It's okay. He deserves an honest answer." He looked at Finn seriously. "Yes, I loved your Mama very much. I still do, in a different way than before. But I made mistakes that hurt her, and that's why we're not together. Do you wish you were together? Sometimes. But what I wish most is that I'd been there for you two from the beginning. That's the thing I regret most, not being there." The honesty was more than Nora had expected, more than she'd thought he was capable of. Maybe he really had changed. Or maybe learning he was a father had changed him. Either way, The man sitting at her dining table wasn't the boy who'd let doubt poison their relationship 7 years ago. Around 2, the boys started getting restless. Cole noticed immediately. "You're probably exhausted. I should go, let you rest. When will we see you again?" Theo asked, the question revealing how much he'd already invested in this new reality. "When would you like to see me?" Cole asked carefully. "Tomorrow," Finn said immediately. "I fly back to Seattle tomorrow," Nora interjected. "We have school on Monday." Cole's face fell, just for a second, before he schooled it back to neutral. "Of course, school is important. But maybe we could do a video call? Tuesday evening? I could call, and we could talk, see each other on the screen even if we can't be in the same room. Like FaceTime?" Finn asked. "Exactly like FaceTime." The boys looked to Nora for confirmation. She nodded. "Tuesday at 7 p.m., our time. That's 9 p.m., Chicago time. Don't be late." "I won't be," Cole promised. "And maybe next weekend, if your mama says it's okay, I could come to Seattle. See where you live. Meet the chickens." "Really?" Finn's eyes went wide. "If it's okay with your mama?" 3 pairs of eyes turned to Nora. She felt the weight of the decision, of opening her home to Cole, of letting him into the life she'd built deliberately without him. But she'd brought them here. She'd started this, and the boys deserved consistency, not half measures. "Next weekend," she agreed. "Saturday and Sunday. You can stay at a hotel, but you're welcome for meals and time with the boys." "Thank you," Cole said quietly, the words carrying more weight than gratitude. "Thank you for letting me try." The goodbye was awkward. The boys hugged him, getting more comfortable with the gesture. Cole held them like he was trying to memorize the feeling. Then he looked at Nora, clearly wanting to hug her too, but unsure if he had permission. She stepped forward, let him pull her into a brief embrace that felt nothing like yesterday's grief-stricken collapse. This was different, tentative, the beginning of something new rather than the ending of something old. "See you Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday," he confirmed. 9 p.m., your time. I'll call exactly on time." And he did. Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, Nora's phone rang with a FaceTime call. The boys scrambled to answer it, fighting over who got to hold the phone until Nora set it up on the counter where they could both see. Cole's face appeared on the screen, and Nora watched her sons light up at the sight of their father. It was such a small thing, a video call, but the consistency of it, the reliability, that was everything. The calls became routine. Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m., like clockwork. Cole never missed one, never even called late. And slowly, over those pixelated conversations, Nora watched a relationship build. That first weekend in Seattle was harder than the Christmas meeting. The dramatic revelation was over. Now came the boring, difficult work of actually being a family. Cole arrived Friday evening, checked into the Four Seasons downtown, and came to the house for dinner. The boys were excited but also nervous, their home invaded by this man who was still learning how to be their father. Theo kept watching him carefully, assessing. Finn talked non-stop, filling any silence with chatter. Bertie made her famous chicken enchiladas and watched Cole like a hawk, clearly ready to evict him at the first sign he was causing Nora stress. After dinner, Cole asked to see their rooms. The boys led him upstairs proudly, showing him their bunk beds and their books and their collection of rocks that Finn insisted were probably fossils but were definitely just rocks. "This is your house," Cole said, looking around at the craftsman-style home Nora had bought 3 years ago. "You built this." "All of it," Nora confirmed. "Every choice, every piece of furniture, every paint color. This is our life. This is what we made without you." The reminder was deliberate. He needed to understand he was the guest here. This wasn't his world to reshape. It was theirs to invite him into, if he proved worthy. "I'm not trying to change anything," Cole said quietly. "I just want to be part of it. Then prove it. Show up. Be consistent. Don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't." That weekend set the pattern. Cole came to Seattle every other weekend. The routine became familiar. Friday evening arrival, Saturday morning pancake attempts that got gradually better, afternoons at parks or museums or just at home. Sunday brunch, then his evening flight back to Chicago. But it wasn't all smooth. There were hard moments. Like the second weekend when Cole had a work emergency and almost canceled. Nora had called him, her voice quiet but firm. "The boys have been counting down days. They've planned what they want to show you. If you cancel because of work, you're teaching them that business matters more than they do. Is that the lesson you want them to learn? Cole had gotten on the plane. Or the third weekend, when Finn had a spectacular meltdown over something trivial, and Cole tried to logic away the tantrum. Tried to explain why Finn was being unreasonable. Tried to fix it with words when what Finn needed was just to feel his feelings. Nora had pulled Cole aside while Bertie sat with Finn. You can't logic away emotions. Sometimes kids just need to fall apart and know you'll stay while they do. You don't have to fix it. You just have to be present. I don't know how to do that, Cole admitted. Then learn. Because parenting isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up even when you don't. The next meltdown, Cole did better. Sat with Theo through tears about a lost toy. Didn't try to replace it or minimize it, just acknowledge that it was sad and it was okay to be sad. The video calls continued. Twice a week, every week, without fail. The boys started looking forward to them, started saving up things to tell Cole. Started calling him Dad sometimes, when they forgot to be careful. The first time Finn said it, just casually in conversation, "Thanks, Dad." About something small, Cole's face had done something complicated. He'd looked at Nora through the screen, his eyes asking permission. She'd nodded. It's their choice, what they call you. If they're ready for Dad, then that's what you are. 3 months in, Cole asked if the boys could come to Chicago for a weekend. Nora's first instinct was to say no. They were too young. It was too much. She wasn't ready to send them across the country without her. But Bertie had pulled her aside. You can't hold them back because you're scared. They need to know they're safe with him, that you trust him with them. Let them go. So Nora had sent her babies on a plane to Chicago and spent the entire weekend anxious, checking her phone, obsessively calling 3 times the first day until Bertie physically removed the phone from her hands. The boys came back happy, full of stories about Cole's penthouse and the aquarium and the science museum and how they'd made pasta from scratch and only burned it a little bit. He let us sleep in his bed, Finn reported, because the guest room felt too big and we wanted to be close to someone. The image of Cole sleeping in his massive bed with 2 6-year-olds starfished. Across it made Nora's heart do something painful and healing simultaneously. 4 months in, there was the weekend Cole missed. Not because of work, but because he was sick. Actually, genuinely sick with the flu, fever of 103, his assistant called to cancel. But Cole had called the boys himself, his voice rough, apologizing. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to come. I've been looking forward to this all week, but I don't want to get you sick." "It's okay," Theo had said, and meant it. "You can come when you're better. We'll still be here." The grace of it, the understanding had made Cole cry. Nora had watched through the screen as this powerful man, laid low by illness and fatherhood, had wept at his son's forgiveness. 5 months in, they'd established real routine. The boys knew when to expect Cole's calls, knew which weekends he was coming, had a calendar in their room where they marked off days. Nora and Cole had learned to communicate efficiently. Text updates about school stuff, behavior issues, funny things the boys had said. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was partnership. The beginning of real co-parenting. They'd also started therapy, both individual and parenting sessions with Dr. Morrison, who helped them navigate the complicated terrain of raising children together while figuring out what they were to each other. "You're still in love with him," Dr. Morrison had observed during one of Nora's solo sessions. "I don't know what I feel," Nora had replied honestly. "I loved who he was. I respect who he's becoming, but I don't know if that adds up to being in love. Do you want it to?" The question had haunted Nora for weeks. Did she want to be in love with Cole again? Did she want to risk that vulnerability, that potential heartbreak? Did she want to model for her sons that broken things could be repaired or that some breaks were permanent? 6 months after that Christmas Eve revelation, Cole had asked the question Nora had been half expecting, half dreading. They were in Seattle, at the park near her house, watching the boys play on the elaborate jungle gym. The spring afternoon was perfect, all sunshine and cherry blossoms. "It's been 6 months, Cole said quietly. "You told me to ask again in 6 months. So I'm asking, is it still not yet?" Nora watched Finn attempt to climb something definitely not meant to be climbed while Theo shouted warnings from below. Watched her boys, so confident, so secure, so absolutely certain they were loved. "You've been consistent," she admitted. "You've shown up. You've learned. You've become someone they can count on. But I'm happy, Cole. With my life, Exactly as it is. I have my business, my children, my peace. Getting involved with you romantically risks all of that. And I'm not sure the potential gain is worth a certain risk. She could feel his disappointment, even though he was trying to hide it. What would make you sure? He asked. What would I have to do or prove or be for you to be willing to risk it? Nora thought about it, really thought. What did she need? Keep being their father, she said finally. Keep showing up, keep growing, keep being the person they need. And in another 6 months, ask me again. Let's see if this consistency continues. If you can maintain it not just through the novelty phase, but through the boring, hard, everyday reality of it. So not no, just not yet. Not yet, she confirmed. Maybe never, but maybe eventually. Time will tell. Cole had accepted it with grace. Okay, 6 more months. I can work with that. And he had. The pattern continued. Video calls, every other weekend. Holidays, negotiated carefully. First day of school photos texted. Report cards shared. The mundane, beautiful, difficult work of being a family. 8 months in, Cole had called with an idea that would change everything. I've been thinking, he'd said during one of their co-parenting phone calls after the boys were asleep, about what you built, about the struggle you went through, about how many other people are going through the same thing right now. Okay, Nora had said cautiously. I want to start a foundation for single parents trying to build businesses, free childcare, seed funding, mentorship, business training, everything you needed 7 years ago that didn't exist. I want to build it in the boys' names. The Finn and Theo Foundation. Nora had gone very still. Why? Because they changed my life. Because knowing them exists has made me want to do something meaningful with resources I didn't earn through virtue. Because if we can help other parents give their children what you gave ours, then maybe we can change some lives. The sincerity in his voice had been undeniable. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a tax dodge. This was genuine desire to transform his belated understanding of what mattered into something tangible. I'm in, she'd said, but I want real input. Not just my name on a board, real program design, real power. Already planned for, Cole had replied, and she'd heard the smile in his voice. I was hoping you'd say that. They'd spent the next 4 months building it together. Late-night video calls discussing curriculum, weekend planning sessions while the boys played. Nora designing programs based on her lived experience. Cole leveraging his resources and connections to make it real. And somewhere in those late-night conversations about childcare ratios and funding models, something had shifted. They'd stopped being just co-parents and started being partners. Not romantically, not yet, but something. Colleagues, building something meaningful. Friends, maybe. Or something adjacent to friendship that didn't have a name yet. The Finn and Theo Foundation opened its doors in Chicago's South Side 18 months after that Christmas Eve dinner. The ribbon-cutting ceremony featured the boys, now 7.5 years old, wielding comically oversized scissors under the media glare. Cole gave a speech about fatherhood, about learning that wealth meant nothing without people to share it with, about wanting to help single parents who were doing the impossible every day. Nora stood beside him, watching him speak, and realized something that terrified her. She was falling in love with him again, not with the boy who doubted her 7 years ago, but with the man he'd become. The father who showed up, the partner who listened, the person who'd taken his biggest failure and transformed it into purpose. After the ceremony, after the photos and the interviews and the celebration, after the boys were asleep in their hotel room watched by Birdie, Nora and Cole found themselves alone on the terrace of his penthouse. Chicago spread below them. The city where everything had fallen apart, now the city where something new was being built. 18 months, Cole said quietly. You said 6 months, but I gave you 12 more. So I'm asking for the 3rd time, and I promise if the answer is still not yet, I'll stop asking. I'll be their father and your CO parent, and nothing more if that's what you need. He turned to face her, and in the city lights his eyes were the same. Gray-green as their son's, full of hope and fear in equal measure. Is there any possibility of us? Not as we were, but as we are now. Not the kids who broke each other, but the adults who've learned from it. Can you ever see yourself trusting me with more than co-parenting? Nora looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd called every Tuesday and Thursday for 18 months without fail. Who'd rescheduled board meetings to make soccer games. Who'd learned to make pancakes and braid hair and negotiate with 7-year-olds. who'd taken his guilt and his grief and transformed them into a foundation that would help thousands of families. "Ask me to dinner," she said. "What?" "Ask me to dinner. Just the two of us. No children, no business, no history. Just two people seeing if they enjoy each other's company without all the weight we carry." Cole's face transformed with cautious hope. "Tomorrow night, I know a place. Terrible lighting, mediocre wine, best pasta in Chicago." "Perfect," Nora said, and meant it. The dinner was awkward and wonderful and nothing like their first relationship. They talked about the foundation, about the boys, about their businesses. They talked about therapy and growth and what they'd learned about themselves in the years apart. They talked about their mistakes, not to assign blame but to understand, to acknowledge that they'd both been young and scared and hadn't known how to fight for each other. Cole told her about the years after she'd left, about dating women who reminded him of her, about the engagement to someone else that had imploded because he couldn't stop comparing her to a memory, about the therapy he'd started 3 years ago to understand why he kept choosing people he couldn't fully love. Nora told him about the early years of single motherhood, about nights when she'd cried from exhaustion, about the fear that she'd made the wrong choice keeping the boys from him, about building an empire, partly from ambition but partly from terror that, if she stopped moving, stopped building, the grief would catch her. It wasn't romantic. It was honest. And honesty, they'd both learned, was more valuable than romance. At the end of the night, Cole walked her back to her hotel. Didn't ask to come up. Just stood in the lobby and said, "Can we do this again?" "Yes," Nora had said. But slowly, carefully, with the boys at the center of every decision. Slowly, he'd agreed. "I can do slowly. I've waited 7 years. I can wait as long as you need." They started dating, if dating was the right word for two people in their early 30s with a shared history and twin sons. Dinners, when their schedules aligned. Video calls that weren't about the boys but about each other. Conversations about books and art and what they wanted from life now versus what they'd wanted at 24. The boys noticed, of course. Kids always noticed. "Are you and Mama getting married?" Finn asked Cole bluntly during a weekend visit about 6 months into the careful courtship. "Would you want us to?" Cole asked, refusing to lie or deflect. "I don't know," Finn admitted. "It's nice having you as our dad. But if you married Mama and then it didn't work out, that would be really sad." The honesty gutted Cole. "You're right. It would be really sad. That's why we're being very careful, making sure that if we do this, we do it right." "How will you know when it's right?" Theo asked. "I think we'll know when being apart feels harder than being together, when the risk of trying feels smaller than the regret of not trying." 3 months later, Nora invited Cole to move to Seattle. Not move in together. That was too fast. But move to Seattle, get a place near them, be present not just every other weekend but all the time. "My business is in Chicago," Cole had said, but she could see him calculating, figuring out how to make it work. "So, run it remotely. Fly back for board meetings. You're the CEO. You can work from anywhere. And us? What would we be? Dating. Still figuring it out. But dating in the same city where you can actually be part of their daily lives. Where you can go to their school plays and soccer games without taking a private jet. Where we can try to build something real instead of something that exists across time zones." Cole had made the move in 2 months. Bought a condo 3 blocks from her house. Close enough to be present. Far enough to maintain boundaries. The boys had been cautiously excited. Theo worried it was too much too fast. Finn was just happy to have Dad nearby. And Nora? Nora was terrified and hopeful in equal measure. The daily proximity changed everything. Cole became part of their routine. Wednesday night dinners, Saturday morning soccer games, homework help and bedtime stories and the mundane moments that built real relationships. He and Nora went on actual dates. Dinner and movies and long walks around Green Lake. They held hands. They kissed, carefully, testing whether the chemistry was still there under all the history. It was different than before, less desperate, more solid, but definitely there. They fought too, about parenting decisions and scheduling conflicts and how much time Cole spent on his phone during family dinners. But they fought differently than they had at 24. They used their therapy tools. They took breaks when emotions got too high. They apologized and meant it. A year after Cole moved to Seattle, Nora woke up one morning and realized something had shifted. She didn't remember the exact moment it had happened. couldn't point to a specific conversation or gesture. But sometime in the past year of dinners and arguments and soccer games and co-parenting, she'd stopped being afraid. She was in love with Cole Hartwell, not the boy from 7 years ago, but the man standing in her kitchen making pancakes that were actually edible now, singing off-key while her sons giggled at his terrible voice. She loved him. And for the first time in 8 years, that love didn't terrify her. That night, after the boys were asleep, after they'd cleaned up dinner and sat on her back porch watching the Seattle drizzle, Nora took Cole's hand. "Remember when you asked if there was a possibility of us? That was 2 years ago, but yes, I remember every time I asked. I'm ready," she said. "Not for marriage or promises about forever, but I'm ready to try, really try, to see if we can be more than Keo parents who are friendly. Are you sure?" Cole's voice was careful, like he was afraid of hoping too hard. "No," Nora admitted. "I'm not sure. I'm terrified, actually, but I love you. I love who you've become. I love the father you are. I love the partner you've been. And I think the fear of losing that is smaller than the regret I'd feel if we never tried." Cole pulled her close, and this kiss was different from all the careful ones before. This was the kiss of two people who'd earned each other through time and consistency and choosing to show up even when it was hard. "I love you too," he whispered against her hair. "I never stopped. Even when I thought I'd lost you forever, I never stopped." They told the boys the next morning over breakfast. Not that they were getting married or making dramatic changes, just that they were officially together now. Dating. Seeing where it went. "Does this mean we have to call you Dad now?" Finn asked Nora, attempting a joke that didn't quite land. "It means we're a family," Nora said. "All of us. Trying to figure out what that looks like." "We're already a family," Theo pointed out with his characteristic precision. "This just means you two finally figured it out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. The next year unfolded with the kind of gentle domesticity Nora had once thought impossible. Cole spent most nights at her place. They combined schedules, planned vacations, navigated the boys' increasingly complex activities. They fought about stupid things like whose turn it was to do laundry, and serious things like whether the boys were ready for their own phones. They made up and made love, and made a life that felt solid in ways Nora had never experienced. The foundation expanded to 6 cities. Nora's business opened properties in Paris and Tokyo. Cole's firm designed a building in Dubai that won international awards. They were building empire and family simultaneously, and for the first time neither felt like it was suffering. 2 years after they'd officially started dating, 4 years after that Christmas Eve revelation, Cole showed up at Nora's house on a random Tuesday morning. The boys were at school. Nora was working from home, reviewing plans for the Barcelona property while trying to drink coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Cole had a key now. He let himself in, and she heard him moving around downstairs but stayed focused on her work. Then he appeared in her office doorway, holding yellow roses. Her favorite, the ones she never bought for herself because they felt too extravagant. "What are these for?" she asked, smiling. "Nora Kingsley, will you marry me?" The question was so abrupt, so lacking in preamble, that she actually laughed. "What?" He pulled out a ring box, got down on one knee in her office doorway, and asked again. "Will you marry me? Not because we have children together, not because it's expected, not because we're trying to fix the past, but because I love you, because I love the life we've built, because I want to keep building it until we're old and gray and the boys are bringing us grandchildren to spoil." The ring was beautiful. Custom designed, because of course it was. But Nora barely looked at it. "Did you ask them first?" she asked. "The boys? I asked them this morning. Told them I wanted to marry you, but only if they were okay with it." "What did they say?" "Theo said it was about time." Finn said, "Only if I promised to keep making pancakes every Sunday." Nora laughed through the tears that were already falling. "Those sound like reasonable terms. So is that a yes?" "On one condition." Cole waited, patient. "We write our own vows, real ones, about showing up, about communication, about choosing each other every day, especially when it's hard, about being a family that's built on honesty instead of fantasy." "Deal," Cole said. "Though I should tell you, I've been writing vows in my head for 2 years now. They're pretty good. Then I guess I need to step up my game." "Is that a yes, Nora?" "Yes," she said, pulling him up from his knees and into her arms. "Yes, let's do this thing properly this time." They picked up the boys from school together that afternoon and took them for ice cream to celebrate. The boys were excited but also practical, already negotiating details. "Do we have to wear fancy suits again?" Finn asked. "Do we get to invite our friends?" Theo wanted to know. "Can we have a space theme?" Finn again. "Absolutely not," Nora and Cole said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. They planned the wedding together, all four of them. Not a society spectacle like Cole's family would have wanted, but a small ceremony on Nora's back deck overlooking the water. 50 people, not 500. Friends and chosen family, not business obligations. The boys would be ring bearers, which Finn took very seriously, and Theo treated as a logistical challenge to be solved. Birdie cried when they asked her to officiate. David Park flew in from LA. Cole's brother, who'd reconciled with him 2 years prior, stood as best man. Catherine Hartwell was notably absent. She'd reached out 6 months ago, asking to meet her grandsons. Cole had told her supervised visits only, earned access, not automatic. She declined, said she needed time to think about it. Time was still passing. The morning of the wedding, Nora stood in her bedroom looking at the dress she'd chosen. Simple, elegant, white again, because white had become her signature, the color of second chances. "Are you ready?" Birdie asked, appearing in the doorway. "I think so." "Is that terrible? That I'm only think so on my wedding day?" "It's honest," Birdie said. "And honesty is what makes this different from last time. You're not walking into a fantasy. You're walking into a partnership with someone who's proven he can show up. That's better than certainty based on nothing." The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. The boys walked down the makeshift aisle first, carrying rings with exaggerated care. Cole stood at the end in a suit that made him look devastating, but Nora barely noticed the suit. She only saw his face. The love there, the wonder, the gratitude that she was giving him this chance. When it was time for vows, Cole went first. "Nora, 8 years ago I lost you because I didn't know how to fight for what mattered. I let doubt and fear and other people's opinions poison the best thing in my life. I can't get those years back. I can't undo the pain I caused or the time I missed with our sons. But I can promise you this, I will show up. Every single day, for the rest of my life, I will show up. For the boring Tuesdays and the exciting adventures, for the fights and the forgiveness, for our boys and whatever else we build together. I will ask instead of assume. I will communicate instead of withdrawing. I will choose you and them and this family over everything else that might compete for my attention. I love you, not perfectly but wholly, and I will spend the rest of my life earning the trust you're giving me today." Nora's vows came from a place she'd been protecting for 8 years, now finally opened. "Cole, 8 years ago, I ran because I didn't know how to stay and fight. I made choices based on fear instead of trust. I kept your sons from you because I was protecting myself more than I was protecting them. I can't undo that. I can only promise you this. I will trust you with the truth, even when it's hard. I will give you the chance to choose us every day, and I will choose you back. I will forgive us both for being human, for making mistakes, for not knowing then what we know now. I love you, not because you're perfect, but because you've shown me that change is real, that people can grow, that second chances exist if we're brave enough to take them." The boys, sitting in the front row, were grinning. Theo gave a subtle thumbs up. Finn was crying, though he'd deny it later. "By the power vested in me by the internet and the state of Washington," Birdie said with a smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife in the family you've already been building for years. Cole, kiss your bride." And he did. And Nora kissed him back. And their sons cheered. And it wasn't perfect, wasn't a fairy tale ending where everything was magically fixed. But it was real, built on years of showing up, built on truth and therapy and choosing each other day after day after day. The reception was in her backyard, catered by a local restaurant, dancing on the deck while the sun set over Seattle. The boys danced with abandon, pulling Nora and Cole into their circle. Later, when the guests had left and the boys were asleep in their beds, Nora and Cole sat on the back steps looking at the stars. "We did it," Cole said quietly. "We did, though this is really just the beginning. I know, and I'm ready for all of it. The boring parts, the hard parts, the beautiful parts." "Me too," Nora said, leaning into him. "Me too. You know what this story is really about? It's about what happens when you stop running from your past and start building from it. When you take the broken pieces and create something new instead of trying to glue the old thing back together. Nora and Cole didn't recreate their first relationship. They built something entirely different, something stronger because it was built on truth instead of fantasy, on consistency instead of passion, on showing up instead of promising. But this isn't where the story ends, because real stories don't end. They evolve. 3 years after the wedding, Nora and Cole stood in the kitchen of the home they'd bought together, a bigger place that could accommodate their blended, chaotic life. The boys were 11 now, on the edge of middle school, changing in ways that both terrified and delighted their parents. Finn was still fearless, still asking a million questions, now obsessed with robotics, and convinced he was going to build the first AI that could make jokes. Theo had discovered a love for writing, filled notebooks with stories about underwater worlds and unlikely heroes. And there was a new addition. 2-year-old Ruby toddled into the kitchen, her dark curls bouncing, demanding breakfast with the imperious tone only toddlers could master. This child, conceived in love instead of accident, born into a family instead of uncertainty, was the culmination of everything they'd built. The boys adored her, fought over who got to help with her, read to her, play with her. She was theirs in a way that felt complete. "Can you believe we're doing this again?" Cole asked, referring to the terrible twos they were currently surviving. "Didn't we learn our lesson with twins?" "Apparently not," Nora said, laughing as Ruby smeared yogurt across her face with gleeful determination. "Do you ever think about how different everything would be if you'd told me 8 years ago?" "Every day. But then I think, if I'd told you then, we'd have been together for the wrong reasons. You'd have stayed from obligation. I'd have always wondered. The boys would have grown up in that uncertainty. This way, we got to choose each other. That's worth the 8 years apart." "You think so? Even with all the pain?" Nora looked at their life, at the family photos on the fridge, at Ruby destroying her breakfast, at the sound of the boys arguing upstairs about whose turn it was to feed the chickens, at Cole standing in their kitchen, comfortable and present, and exactly where he was supposed to be. "Yes," she said, "even with all the pain. Because this, what we have now, was built by people who learned from breaking. And that makes it stronger than anything we could have built at 24. That afternoon, Nora had a speaking engagement at the University of Washington. She'd been invited to talk to business students about entrepreneurship, about building an empire from nothing. But when she took the podium, she decided to talk about something else. "They tell you in business school that failure is part of the process," she began. "That you'll make mistakes and learn from them and iterate until you succeed. And that's true for companies, but it's also true for life. 8 years ago, I made a choice that looked like failure. I walked away from a relationship. I hid a pregnancy. I raised twin sons alone while building a business from a garage apartment that barely had heat. Every business magazine that's profiled me calls it a triumph story. Single mother builds billion-dollar empire. But they miss the real story. The real story is that I was broken and scared and made decisions from that brokenness. The real story is that I kept a man from knowing his children because I was protecting myself more than I was protecting them. The real story is that success in business doesn't mean you've succeeded at life. It took me 6 years to tell him. 6 years of living with that secret. And when I finally did, I learned something crucial. The story I'd been telling myself for 6 years about him not wanting us, about him resenting obligation, about needing to protect my children from his doubt. That story was built on a foundation of one misheard conversation and a mother-in-law's manipulation. The truth was different. The truth was that we were both young and scared and didn't know how to fight for each other. The truth was that fear makes us make terrible decisions. And the truth was that healing required me to stop running and start standing still long enough to be honest. So here's what I want you to know. Your failures in life will teach you more than your successes ever will. The relationships you break, the mistakes you make, the times you run instead of fight, all of that shapes who you become. The question is whether you let it destroy you or whether you use it to build something new. I used my breaking to build a business. But more importantly, I used it to build myself into someone who could eventually trust again, who could eventually risk again, who could eventually stand in front of the man who broke her heart and say, "Let's try this again, properly this time." And the beautiful thing, the breaking made the rebuilding stronger, because we didn't try to recreate what was. We built something entirely new from the pieces of what had been destroyed. The students gave her a standing ovation, but Nora barely noticed, because there, in the back of the auditorium, stood Cole with Ruby on his shoulders and the boys on either side of him. Her family, her choice, her hard-won, imperfect, beautiful family. After the talk, a young woman approached her. She couldn't have been more than 22, and there were tears on her face. "Miss Kingsley, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. The father doesn't know. We broke up 3 months ago, and I'm terrified to tell him because what if he thinks I'm trying to trap him? What if telling him ruins everything? What if staying silent is the best choice?" Nora looked at this young woman, at the fear she remembered so viscerally it made her chest tight. "Here's what I wish someone had told me," Nora said gently. "Staying silent isn't protecting anyone. It's choosing fear over truth, and fear makes terrible decisions. Tell him. Give him the chance to step up or step back, but give him the chance. And whatever he chooses, you'll survive it. You'll build something from it, but you'll build it on truth instead of secrets, and that foundation will hold better than anything constructed from fear. What if he doesn't want the baby? Then you'll know, and knowing, even when it hurts, is better than carrying uncertainty for years. Trust me on this. I carried uncertainty for 6 years, and it nearly destroyed all of us." The young woman nodded, wiped her tears, and thanked Nora before disappearing into the crowd. Cole appeared at Nora's elbow, Ruby still perched on his shoulders, the boys trailing behind, comparing notes on their favorite parts of the talk. "You just potentially changed that girl's entire life," he said quietly. "I hope so. I hope she's braver than I was. You were plenty brave. You just didn't know it yet." That evening, after Ruby was in bed and the boys were doing homework, Nora and Cole sat on their back porch watching the Seattle twilight turn the sky purple and gold. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Any of it?" "Parts of it. I regret the pain we caused each other. I regret the years you missed with the boys. I regret not being brave enough to trust you with the truth sooner. But I don't regret what we built from the breaking. I don't regret becoming someone who could do it alone, even though I'm glad I don't have to anymore. I don't regret the empire I built or the life I created, and I definitely don't regret this." She gestured to their home, their life, the sound of their sons' voices drifting through the open window. "Neither do I," Cole said, "though I wish I could go back and tell 28-year-old me to fight harder, to trust more, to not let my mother's poison take root. 28-year-old, you wasn't ready to be what we needed. Neither was 24-year-old me. We had to break to learn how to build properly. You really believe that? That the breaking was necessary? I think it's the story we tell ourselves to make peace with the pain. But yeah, I believe it. Because look at what we built. Look at our boys. Look at the foundation helping thousands of families. Look at us, still choosing each other every single day. That's not in spite of the breaking. That's because of it." Later that night, tucked into bed with Cole reading beside her, and the house quiet except for the sounds of their family sleeping, Nora thought about the journey that had brought them here. From Chicago to Seattle, from broken to whole, from secrets to truth, from fear to trust, from running to standing still, from destroying to building. It hadn't been a straight line. It hadn't been easy, but it had been real. And real, Nora had learned, was better than perfect. Real could be built on. Real could last. Real could withstand the boring Tuesdays and the hard conversations and the moments when love felt more like choice than feeling. Real was waking up every morning and choosing this person, this life, this imperfect, beautiful, hard-won family. And that was enough. More than enough. That was everything. So let me ask you something, because this story isn't just about Nora and Cole. It's about every one of us carrying secrets we think are protecting us but are really just keeping us trapped. What conversation are you avoiding that could change everything? What truth are you holding back because you're afraid of the consequences? Who do you need to forgive, including yourself? Because here's what I want you to understand. The secrets you carry, they cost you. Maybe not in obvious ways, maybe not immediately, but they compound like interest, growing heavier year by year, until you're carrying weight you can't even remember picking up. Nora carried her secret for 6 years before the weight of it became too much. Before she realized that protecting herself was hurting her children. Before she understood that fear-based decisions have consequences that ripple through time. And when she finally told the truth, yes, it was painful. Yes, it was complicated. Yes, there were consequences. But those consequences were finite. That pain had an ending. And on the other side of truth was the possibility of building something real. So here's my challenge to you. If this story moved you, if Nora's courage inspired you, if you see yourself in any part of this journey, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Hit that like button. Tell the algorithm that stories about second chances and hard-won redemption matter, that we need more narratives about people who break and rebuild instead of people who have perfect lives from the start. 2. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's running from a hard conversation, someone who's carrying a secret that's crushing them, someone who thinks their mistakes are permanent. Send it to them. Tell them you love them. Tell them breaking doesn't mean broken beyond repair. 3. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you stories that don't just entertain, they transform. Stories about real people facing real challenges and finding real solutions. Stories that remind us we're all human, all struggling, all doing the best we can with what we know. And here's the most important part. Drop a comment and tell me, what part of this story hit you hardest? Was it Nora's courage to return? Cole's tears when he met his sons? The 7 years of single motherhood? The slow rebuilding of trust? The foundation that turned pain into purpose? I read every single comment. Your stories inspire our stories. Your courage gives other people permission to be brave. Your honesty creates space for others to be honest. So talk to me. Tell me what you're carrying. Tell me what you're afraid of. Tell me what you need to hear. Because that's what this community is about. Not just consuming stories, but connecting through them. Not just being entertained, but being transformed. Not just watching other people's journeys, but examining our own. Nora's story started with a billionaire's Christmas invitation and ended with a family built on truth. But your story is still being written. And the next chapter starts with whatever choice you make after watching this. Will you keep running from the hard conversations? Or will you stand still long enough to have them? Will you keep carrying secrets that are crushing you? Or will you risk the truth? Will you let your breaking define you? Or will you use it to build something stronger? The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Nora just showed you what's possible when you choose truth over fear. When you choose building over hiding. When you choose showing up over running away. So here's my final thought. You're not defined by what broke you. You're not defined by the mistakes you made. You're not defined by the relationships that failed or the choices you regret. You're defined by what you do next. Nora's next was building an empire while raising twins alone. Then it was telling the truth even when it terrified her. Then it was giving Cole the chance to prove he'd changed. Then it was choosing to trust again. Then it was building a foundation that helps thousands. Then it was creating a family from broken pieces. What's your next? Whatever it is, I believe you can do it. I believe you're stronger than you think. I believe your breaking can become your building if you let it. This is Dr. Phillips, reminding you that love and twilight always give way to dawn. The question is whether you'll be brave enough to stay awake through the darkness to see it. Now get into those comments and let's talk. Let's build community. Let's remind each other that we're not alone in this. That second chances exist. That truth is stronger than fear. That broken things can be made beautiful again. Until next time, choose truth. Choose courage. Choose showing up. And remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning.